Hi, I'm Harry Wright, and you're watching Autism 101. I'm an autistic comedian, and every week during UK lockdown, I'll be making a new instalment of this series and showing you how to be autistic and some of the fun things you can get away with. So this week we're going to be speaking to Aaron Hood, who's another autistic comedian, an extremely funny guy. We're going to be chatting about what it takes to make work when you're autistic, how autism affects your comedy and how it affects performance, and yeah, a lot of other things. Not sexual performance, don't worry. He's definitely very heterosexual. Actually, this week I've been thinking I don't really talk enough about my own personal life on here. No one wants to hear it, but I enjoy talking about it. Now, I've said I'm gay before and I've sort of made allusions to it, but it's never been kind of something I've wanted to discuss in much detail. I'm single at the moment. I'm on my own, obviously, because it can be hard dating when you're autistic. But I'm trying to treat people a bit better on apps and on sort of social media sites. But sometimes you forget there's a person on the other end of it. And mostly because there often isn't. It's all bots. But one guy was describing himself and he put in the bio, America's Next Top. Like, and then when I went, model? He unmatched? Like, how ridiculous is that? But I don't blame him, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't want to be with someone that doesn't appreciate god-tier puns like he'd made either. I don't think he was even American. I think he just loved the programme and just wanted to make a sexual pun based on it. You know what, maybe I should have kept him, like, that's definitely my energy. But I've been in love before, I've had relationships before, and I worry, like, that was it, like, that was my one shot. Because often it's very hard to feel down about yourself or feel very anxious when you've got some sort of learning difficulty or special need, and, you know, no one will love you. You know how you've got a friend that's always sort of moaning about men, and you might have a girlfriend that does, or a sister, but because of that negative attitude, she can't get anyone? Like, that's how I feel about myself, and I think it's how a lot of autistic people can feel about ourselves sometimes. But apps have affected my ability to talk to people in real life because I love them, because it's simple, it's clear, there's no possibility for miscommunication. I don't love small talk in real life. But my ability was already impaired enough and apps have made it worse. Like, you have these really boring conversations like, hey, hi, how are you? Yeah, good, how are you? Yeah, good, how are you? Yeah, good, how are you? And then like 2 days later, I've tried carrying it out in real life. So I'll go around to his letterbox and knock on the door and bark, any pics? Any pics? And then the next day I'm shouting, hi lol, sticky tongue out emoji. And then the next day I'm going up to his window and yelling, have you got Snapchat? His wife and kids getting out a restraining order, peering through the letterbox. Has he gone yet? Shall we call the police? These apps aren't conducive to real conversation is what I'm saying. And I think if you're someone that does have autism, even though we find it very difficult, it's important to try and have real conversations and try and do our, not necessarily make ourselves integrate, but do our best to try and make things easy for ourselves as possible so that we can explain to other people what we do and don't find easy and difficult. And sometimes the way apps work can mean that that's harder to do because you have to write a little bit of information about yourself in a bio and that's all people know about you. There's no context to it is what I'm saying, and I think that's super important in forming a relationship. I've had really nice dates from them though, but like it's created a barrier that I don't think would have happened had we met naturally. Like I went on a Tinder date down to the pub. I went to the loo, came back, and he was on Grindr. Like, why are you looking for an active downgrade on the date? Like, girl, have some finesse. I mean, obviously we did end up sleeping with each other, but, you know, you've got to take what you can get. But I think the problem for neurotypical people is that when they're on dates, their brain can only retain so much information. Like, you forget about people once you've been talking to them for a little while. You forget to message them back or forget what they've said about themselves and they get annoyed and it can lead to an awkward conversation. Once my housemate said to me, Harry, are you playing Tinder again? Like, playing? Jess, this isn't a game. This is where I'll meet the love of my life. And then she said, oh, right, I only asked because you keep shouting high score every time you get a dick pic. Yeah, so kind of trying to move off it a bit in lockdown, not really be on there so much. But it's a bit hard when you don't really have much else to do in the day. And so something else I've been doing is trying to catch up with people I went to school with and see what they're doing now. I think I referenced this a couple of weeks ago. Now, at school, before I came out, I was a very closeted boy. I wasn't a particularly effeminate boy, but I wasn't good at sort of laddie things like sports and football either. I was good at English and languages. And obviously, when you're at school, in the north, you learn 3 languages. French, German, and straight. So, coming out of school, I knew how to say bonjour, hello, and alright, Dazza, you wanker! That was definitely my favourite one. That's the only one I still use today. But I'm going back to my mum's next week in North Yorkshire, really looking forward to it. Her town's been gentrified, and it's been gentrified in a strange way, where local people haven't really got the idea of how gentrification works. there's an artisan cafe that's opened up down the road that genuinely says, organic coffees and teas with a side helping of quality banter. Like, who's running this cafe? Like, it sounds like something Jeremy Clarkson would open and would hurriedly be shut down by trading standards. It's terrible. Probably, it's almost not as bad as London though. I was once going out for a coffee after a gig in London, and I went and sat. It was in quite a poor area, and I went and sat in. It was in the East End. I went and sat in the cafe afterwards, and it was such a great sort of traditional Cockney cafe. And genuinely on the menu, she had chewing gum, 20p for one stick. Firstly, that is grossly overpriced. But also, who's having a cup of tea and a bit of chewing gum as well, and it's getting stuck in your gullet? I don't know which is worse. I've been around working class communities my whole life, and I love them. But sometimes you do just want a bit of class. And that is why homosexuality is definitely nurture rather than nature. We've been desperate to get out our whole lives. So I'd like to welcome Aaron Hood to the show. Aaron is a very funny, brilliant autistic comedian. He's got his own podcast, the Hoodcast, which I am going to be on hopefully in the near future. So I'll link that up when I do get on it. Do check his stuff out. You'll hear more about everything he's doing at the moment in this interview. Aaron Hood, everyone. Do you feel that being autistic has informed your performance? Like, has it made you better at it? Has it made you worse at it? What techniques have you had to learn to sort of work around it? Or what things do you think it makes you better at? So you were saying earlier that you deal with audience interaction in a sort of very particular way. And because you're not brilliant at having those natural conversations, sometimes you're able to make it funny by having a sort of sharper response to someone.
Yeah. If someone tries to pipe up, I usually, hammer it down. I kind of employ kind of a scorched earth policy. And I think it's sort of a blessing and a curse in that my lack of inhibitions and oversharing has gotten me into trouble in the past. When employed correctly, it's actually a real boon for stand-up in that, some good advice, a very good comic I know called Jason Sam got from another good comic was like, just go on there like you're meant to be on there. And if you look relaxed and comfortable, like you don't give a toss, and you say stuff like that and it shows, I think that's a very powerful tool in your arsenal. Like,
absolutely.
I was doing this gong show for refugees, and one because it was the format where you get 2 minutes grace, you've got to survive 5 minutes. After the 2 minutes grace period, free cards, you're out. Basic gong stuff. And this one American woman was getting a bit card happy, and I was trying to do some pretty spicy political material, but she put a card up. And I just thought, well, she's put a card up. She has no power over me anymore. And I just went, this was about the time the Californian bushfires was raging. And so I just said, I don't even like California anyway. I'm glad half of it's on fire, And from then on, I got the audience back on side because I was in danger of getting, carded out. And it was just, I think, gong shows either really wank the audience off, or you have to be kind of really like blatant in the fact that you don't care about them. I hope that works.
Do you think? I think like in some ways that's easier for autistic comics because we're used to having to put that front on in real life anyway to sort of get through day-to-day interaction, so it comes more naturally on stage. It isn't such a switch into persona because we're constantly in persona anyway.
Yeah. I can't remember the Japanese philosopher, but they say I don't know who it was, and even if I did, I wouldn't want to hazard the guess because I don't want to horrendously mispronounce the name. But basically the idea of like masks, in that like you kind of wear three masks, in that the mask you show the public, and then the mask you show family and friends under that, and then the mask when you're truly alone with your thoughts, being kind of closest to who you are, like who you can intuit you are. And I feel that since you're kind of used to sort of having a really strong outer layer of mask anyway, it's just not, it doesn't feel very abnormal from what you're doing anyway, but except this time you've got that sort of serotonin response of, you know, the adulation and the laughs, hopefully, and you know, you're in control of that situation, because you talked about before we went on air about how control is very important to you.
Yeah, I was saying the main reason I do it is because I'm able to have an element of it's a conversation I could control, because it's just me and the mic, and obviously I'll have feedback with audience or so on and so forth. But it's a conversation, a channel that I'm in control of in a way I don't have in other aspects of my life.
Yeah, it's an emancipatory exercise in that respect.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I feel it's really, really good for kind of your mental health, and it helps. You can kind of transfer that skill into, you know, having a more equitable social relations, or, you know, getting by socially a lot easier, and, you know, it really helps with your career. Like, if you've been on stage trying to milk an audience when they're giving you nothing, having a slightly tedious business meeting or having to public speak is in your job. There's nothing. It's nothing in comparison. It's just water off a duck's back, you know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I think that's often why. I think it goes two ways. I've known autistic acts that have found it easier and got to a good level fairly quickly, and then 50% of others who have quit due to stuff around finding it too difficult to interact with people and sort of get on with people. So I think there's two extremes to how we tend to interact with the circuit and with being performers.
Yeah, I've always found the interpersonal aspect quite difficult. I don't want to.
Sadly, it's necessary, but it's not easy.
Yeah, and you don't want to overshare, because you don't want to freak people out, and also you know how inherently gossipy any creative industry is, especially comedy.
And absolutely.
Like, you've got to be careful who you say what to, and you don't want to offend people you might need to work with in the future, but you know, you have some instances where there's personal stuff or miscommunications and misunderstandings, or someone says something as a rib or is a bit rude to you and you don't like it, and you're tempted to go full hog and give them both barrels, but you just realize that you kind of give them what they want, and it ends up making you look bad, you know.
I get that, definitely. I think something I've found easy in a way is learning to keeping my onstage persona when off stage interacting with people, and knowing I'm going to have to do it has helped me develop a more confident persona on stage, because I find it really hard to switch. So I've had to make myself kind of stay in that all night almost.
Yeah, like that makes sense, because you kind of view it as the gig doesn't end when with your stage time. The gig is like the whole night almost, where you don't necessarily have to be really vivacious and gregarious all night, but you do have to at least be personable enough that people don't come away thinking that you're a dick, you know.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's the idea of sort of not being defined by it, because although I know it's not something you talk about much, but it's kind of played into issues that you've had in your life that you talk about, and it's kind of harder to create. It's harder to not explore deeper stuff or darker stuff, because that's so bound up with being neurodiverse anyway, that you almost feel like you're not doing yourself or your community a service if you're exploring sort of lighter issues.
Yeah, I do feel kind of the pressure, because there's simultaneously you don't want to be like your whole act or your whole thing, and then have certain people with all the negative perceptions that entails, but you don't want to let people down. And some of the most rewarding experiences I've had when I've talked to other autistic people, or people who were with autistic family members who approach me in the right way, and like some people have thanked me and gave me a hug and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Not in the patronising way, but in a sort of just respectful way. And
Yeah, same.
I
I've
find that
definitely
really
had
rewarding.
I do. I hate the you're brave stuff, but I've definitely had people come up that have got an autistic child and they want my advice on like what it was like growing up, because I was diagnosed when I was quite little, and that's just such a lovely thing. And I don't really think there's any other conditions where it happens. Like, it doesn't happen to friends who are dyslexic comics, for example. And I wonder what it is about autism that makes people want to have that channel of communication with you.
Yeah, I think because that they don't really understand it, and they couldn't possibly in a lot of ways, and especially if their child's non-verbal or is lower functioning, or just isn't very good at communicating for other reasons, with their social skills aren't as good, or they want to have a relationship with their child, and they want to know that their child is going to be able to lead as normal life as possible. I think so. They kind of want to sort of pick your brains for how you've managed to do as well as you've done, so they can maybe impart that sort of advice or put stuff into practice that makes theirs and their kids' lives easier. Because I found there's two very different kinds of autistic parents. There's the ones that will make adjust and are really good about not pigeonholing you, and will treat their autistic children as unique as individuals. Or there's a lot of autistic parents I've seen where they kind of make their child's condition all about them.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, luckily my mum is a special needs teacher anyway, so she was definitely in the first camp. But yeah, that's a real thing.
Yeah, my parents have both work in healthcare, so their background is they've understood where I'm coming from. My mum especially really dove into it, but I noticed that there's others that kind of put on this sort of act where I do all this stuff and I have to do all this extra thing for my autistic child.
yeah, that's very funny.
And when I used to work in a pharmacy, one of the mums was complaining in a way that I found very, very, I can't remember exact words because it was a couple of years ago, but it was in a way that I found personally aggravating. So I said, "Oh, how old is your son?" And she said, blah, blah, blah. And I went, "Oh, your life's going to suck. It only gets worse from here." And I was like, "Oh, thanks for the encouragement." I went, "You're welcome." Like, I was trying to play it off as a joke, but I really just actively wanted to upset her.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Because I was just like, "You're being so horrible about your son."
People want a disabled child like they want a small dog, for example, as a sort of play item, as a toy item, rather than a sort of rounded person. And that's something I found hard sort of on stage. I always worry that I'm effectively parodying myself by even talking about it.
Yeah. Like, you want to be a good ambassador for your community. And you do. I find I do feel some sort of civic and moral responsibility. Yeah. But you've got to do it in a way that isn't just a kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge to people that already get it. You've got to do it.
Yeah.
You've got to find that balancing act, which is really, really hard, of not being too niche, but not sometimes you nuance and context is really, really important when discussing stuff like that. You can't just chuck out stereotypes like grenades and just
of course. And I mean, it's not fair to anyone. I've definitely had a few examples of like weird male banter from acts backstage where like guys of a certain generation have tried to include me by saying like they've made some comment, like they've said like I can't pay my invoices for these gigs. I can never work out how much tax I should be paying because I'm really bad at maths. Look at me. You'd be good at that. It's just like, who are you trying to please here?
Yeah. That's a really, really odd one in that kind of I did I won't use the exact language, but I did this bit where people's conception is either really, really low functioning end of the spectrum, or you're basically a human computer, and
Yeah,
there's no other way that you can be autistic in their brain.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think they're trying to. It's nice to be assumed that you're a super smart maths genius, but I'm not, and most people aren't, and most autistic people, I'd say, aren't. There's
yeah.
a
Well, I'd say
plethora
there's
of
this
interest.
comorbidity between autism and dyspraxia, and most dyspraxic people are obviously going to struggle with key areas of maths, like anything to do with spatial recognition.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
struggle.
probably reverse. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we were net worse at maths than the rest of the population, ironically.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised with that, because when you actually do the digging in types, obviously just don't have no real basis in fact.
Yeah,
It's just
definitely.
this
But
is
like
really
you were
bizarre
saying, like,
conception.
yeah, it is, and there's definitely a sort of autistic circuit that's sprung up in its own right, and which is, I think, it's a really nice thing to have. But on the other hand, like, as people that don't handle competition very well, like, there's a sort of competition between autistic actors who can present our experience most accurately, and I'm not sure that's a particularly good thing immediately.
No, and I don't think you can portray general aspects or overlapping stuff of your experience, but you know there'll be vastly different experiences, because you don't look autistic pretty much most people I meet,
Yeah,
or
same.
every time I go out.
Yeah, I don't know
Um,
what people think autistic people look like. Like, I don't know if there's
yeah,
a standard image. Like, I think you and me between us are probably fairly typical, sort of like a young male with like glasses and a particular way of talking.
yeah,
Like, between the two of us, we're probably fairly typical to how autistic people are imagined to look like. So I never know where that image comes from.
yeah. It's a weird sort of conception, and I think because you can hold a normal conversation with them, they just
Yeah,
assume that you're fine. And I think even if you look a bit nerdy, they're okay with it. So when you actually press people on it, they sort of try and go, well, you know what I mean, and they go, no, I don't. What do you mean?
yeah, yeah,
And they
yeah,
don't usually have an adequate answer.
yeah. I never know what an autistic person is meant to look like. It's always quite a funny thing.
Yeah.
Or
One
like,
time,
no, you say.
yeah, sorry. One time I just said, sorry, did you expect me to rock in here with a crash helmet covered in bubble wrap? I just, I,
Yeah,
I just, I get quite annoyed with it. I try and take it in the spirit. I try and take these things in the spirit that they're intended, but sometimes you're just having a bad day.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not intended badly, but it's I always want to say to kind of, oh, you don't look. I don't know. You don't look white, for example, to another comic, and see like what the reaction to that would be, because it's such a sort of weird nebulous category.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. I don't see any other group being that being a thing
Well,
for.
that's how invisible disabilities work. But yeah, it doesn't work for something like dyslexia. And like, there's a lot of acts that will talk about being dyslexic, for example, and you don't get, oh, you're so brave, or you don't look dyslexic.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, can you imagine?
I
Um,
think it's a very specific thing for it. Like I
mm,
was saying before, the conceptualization is so one way, in that you know because you don't look and behave like you're about to publish an incel manifesto in the next few months. You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's the thing. Like, I think I think the reason that a lot of what's going on at the moment is going on, and quite rightly, there's been a reckoning as to the disgusting behaviour of a lot of male acts in comedy. Um, I sometimes wonder if the majority of male comedians, particularly on the British circuit or the open mic circuit, are autistic and aren't diagnosed. I feel like it's comedy and writing comedy and learning how to perform is a very isolating activity, and it's something that suits autistic people very much. And so I kind of
yeah.
wonder if a lot of what's going on at the moment is because people don't understand how their undiagnosed invisible disability affects how they treat people.
That could be a thing. Obviously, I don't think there's be any way we'd adequately
No, so we can't know.
find that out. But that's an interesting theory to develop. And in terms of it does suit, because you
Yeah,
choose for the most part your own venues, and your own nights where you go and perform at, and you work on your material by yourself. You choose what jokes you perform and how you perform them.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's very much an individualist endeavor.
Yeah. And it works the other way around as well, because in the more negative aspect, like a lot of incel culture is autistic boys online, and very sort of edgelordy comics tend to appeal to those groups, and it's very easy for people that have the difficulties we have to become radicalized by stuff like that. So it's always felt for me like I've got more of a responsibility, because autism is so tangled up in humor and free speech and how those things can work both for the better and the worse.
Yeah. Do you find, obviously, I know that a lot of that culture is, and they're very open about it being, like the autists on pole and all that kind of stuff. But do you feel that kind of the recruitment or propaganda videos, because I was talking about this with my friend, do you feel that they have kind of dog whistles specifically for autistic people in terms of,
very much so.
The set, like with pickup artists, you have this objective, infallible kind of way of approaching and picking up.
Ian Lane was talking about this on Twitch. Yeah, Ian Lane was talking about this on Twitch the other week. And there's definite dog whistles there. Some of it is a sense of, it's how any radicalization works. It's convincing people that they're right, but also that they're alone.
Yeah.
And it does that in a lot of ways, through whether it's through using sexist language or whether it's through using humor and how those things are combined. And it tries to attack people that are perhaps more vulnerable to feeling at a remove from society anyway.
Yeah. I think it serves a couple of things, because a lot of that, the humor and the irony, is just thinly veiled. Your actual views kind of sort of with thinly veiled as a joke, or just saying something really horrible but presenting it as a joke, kind of to prove a point that, they're so, your opponents are so triggered and edgy, can't take a joke, so censorious. You see, they're like, you poke and poke, and then when someone reacts, you're like, you see what they did to me? They're exactly like I said.
And when the whole debate is between groups of people that maybe aren't great with communication anyway, it can easily lead to both sides being quite disingenuous in how they're conducting things.
Yes.
But it's a hard debate, but it's something that needs to be had, because it's part of our community. And I think what we can do, and what a lot of good YouTubers do, for example, is using humour to try and make these people, and make people who don't understand what autism is, feel included rather than excluded. And then the more awareness there is of the condition, the more understanding there is of how it affects people's lives, and then the better education you get, and so on and so forth. And eventually these things won't happen.
You're seeing a lot of real great deradicalization work on LeftTube, people like ContraPoints, Philosophy Tube. Doing really important. Doing really important work in terms of keeping these people, keeping our people safe. Because I feel that autists online are a really valuable resource for political groups, because you think of the obsessive traits and the propensity for high passions and emotionality.
And I think we make better vloggers just because of our fascination with the specific topic we're talking about, and it can mean you're very passionate very early about it.
Yeah, so it's not kind of a gentle descent round the rabbit hole. You'll just jump into it. You're not like you're quicker. You'll quickly progress down the pipeline more so than other people.
Yeah,
and I feel like the emotive language and speaking to people who, like you say, are prone to be excluded from society, and are often, can often be socially isolated. They're very easy. They can be very easy targets for nefarious people.
Do you feel that it's important that we have these conversations mostly within our own community just to try and stem this problem before it happens, or sort of mostly externally to make other people aware so they can play a role in doing it?
I'd personally rather deal with it internally
Yeah.
because, like I was saying, there's not enough education and awareness of autism and invisible disabilities and issues, and I don't trust the neurotypicals not to fuck it up and
Of course.
and deal with it in a way that exacerbates the situation, makes it worse.
Yeah, quite.
Because I see a lot of the coverage, and obviously incels and shooters, but people who are trolling, just maybe saying something a bit douchey on the internet. It doesn't have to be sexist or ableist or whatever. It can just be someone being a knob,
Yeah.
And then I've seen coverage in BBC Sport. Someone made some horrible jokes about someone's death, and they included, oh, this person's autistic, or like the autistic troll. And
Well, they have this with bloody with John T. Bravery as well, who's the guy that tried to tragically murder a young boy in the Tate. And John T. Bravery was going through a lot of issues, and he will rightly be going to prison. But there was a lot of discussion, particularly of him being autistic. And the reason he did it wasn't because he was autistic; it was because there was other mental health stuff going on. But it was like all the coverage of it, even in like sensible news sites like the BBC, was like the autistic teenager who had a particular interest in planes or something that had like nothing to do with it, and it was just such a strange kind of. It was probably meant to to try and explain why he was how he was, but it just felt like such a dog whistle.
Yeah, it seems like they don't understand the implications of what they're saying. I mean, I've put complaints about that into them, and they've just went, "Oh, we're trying to just raise awareness of people's difficulties with autism," and I just went, "Well, not when it's not relevant, and you putting it in there implies that he's doing it because of this." And they just clearly they didn't see anything wrong with how they were portraying autistic people, and and I don't think they can be trusted with this. I think
it's something we have to do ourselves.
Yeah, they're not going to. I don't think they'll do it for us. I just think that we know how to communicate with our own better, and we know how to appeal to them. And I think, I don't know. I don't know whether you felt this, but because of the shared experience, I do tend to trust and open up to and take autistic people more seriously than I do other people.
Yeah, I do and I don't. I do, but I also don't want to be isolationist. But yeah, I tend to, most of my friends are autistic, and probably like it is for any minority group.
Yeah, I don't want to, don't get me wrong, I don't want to form a separatist state, but,
maybe, I don't know, I think it'd be a better place in some ways.
Yeah, I think so. I think I think that it could be, but I don't want to be I don't want to be dependent on external help, and I think just autistic people will be more capable and should be given a chance to self-police in the same way that other groups police their bad actors.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. Where do you stand on kind of self-diagnosis?
I think it can be helpful, and most people I know who have self-diagnosed have gone on to have actually ended up getting diagnosed. Initially, I was quite against it, but I now think that I now think I might have ADHD, and that's purely based on self-diagnosing. But I'm looking to the formal diagnostic process for it, so that's helped me to think it's a more useful thing than I previously did.
Yeah, I think
How about you?
Sometimes it can be like a good idea. Some days I kind of view it almost akin to cultural appropriation, but other days I'm a bit more mellow about it. And I think kind of sometimes people might want to, people who are maybe a bit weird or socially uncomfortable, might just go, oh, I think I'm a bit autistic, and it's like, well, no, you just might just be not that good socially.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely. I think that comes from people trying to understand, but ultimately it's a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So I don't mind that as much as I used to, because I used to get quite annoyed about, "Ooh, I'm a bit autistic too." But I think ultimately it comes from people wanting to relate to people.
Yeah, I think it does come from a place of decency fundamentally. So I've calmed down a bit on it, but I feel like, when kind of comic book movies and geek culture really sort of took off into the popular zeitgeist, like when there's a new Marvel movie every week and Big Bang Theory, and like even my grandparents started watching Big Bang Theory, and I feel like it became kind of a bit cooler to be a bit nerdy, and like people who now started liking the sort of things they would bully kids at school for liking, and I feel that autism sort of came in with that with that sort of culture, that geek chic for some reason. And
yeah. There was a whole kind of brief thing of the sort of Sheldon Cooper thing of like characters that were presumed to be autistic were used as sitcom characters or as like very unrealistic foils in TV programs and like for teenagers to relate to. And I'm not sure. I used to hate that because I was a teenager of that age. I was a teenager then too, but I think I now I kind of don't mind it. I think there's I don't know. I think anything that helps people to understand aspects of autism can be a positive thing.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of problems with Big Bang Theory, but I think Sheldon is fundamentally presented as, yes, he does things that gets on people's nerves, but he is fundamentally kind of lovable in his eccentricities. Yeah. And he's not like, I don't think he's really made the butt of the jokes in a way that's any more or less malicious than anyone else on the show,
Yeah.
So I can understand that, and also I think Jim Parsons does a good job of portraying it respectfully.
Yeah, definitely.
Like Keir Gilchrist, if you've ever seen Atypical.
Yeah, I've seen bits of it. I'm watching it at the moment. I'm quite enjoying it, and I know there was a lot of criticism of that at the time, but I think the main character's portrayed very well.
Yeah, I think it's because the first season they didn't have many autistic writers or consultants, and I've noticed after the first series there was when they got those writers that there's a marked improvement,
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's probably the nicest portrayal of autistic people I've ever I've seen. Another one is Ben Affleck in The Accountant.
Ooh, I need to see that
because he's really, really cool, and he's very obviously on the spectrum, but he's like a kind of nerdy, doesn't like eye contact, but he's a real badass action hero as well.
Excellent.
And I've never seen
figures like that, definitely.
And I've never seen like a proper like sort of James Bond without the misogyny and sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Or sort of more like Jason Bourne.
I was going to say, I sometimes wonder if there's autistic elements to Jason Bourne as well, just for sort of the obsession with bodybuilding and like the way he goes about things. He feels like someone that's trying to fit in a world that doesn't quite accept him.
Yeah, just kind of square pegs in round holes almost. Like it'll get through, but it's in a way that there's a bit of a disconnect, and obviously you can maybe put that down to the trauma and all of that sort of stuff, which will again do that to people. But
yeah, of course,
I can understand where you're coming from in that way, that you have to possess a very, very singular focus to do well in a lot of industries and endeavors, and a lot of us have got that in spades.
Yeah.
I think we started off discussing people self-diagnosing.
Yeah, that was it. I've definitely changed where I am now a bit, because like I say, I used to think it was something that doesn't really help, but I'm self-diagnosed with ADHD, and I think that's helped me to understand things about myself I hadn't before, and it's led to me wanting to go out there and get a formal diagnosis. So doing it myself about something else has helped me to understand why it can be a positive thing.
Yeah.
And I think like if people are self-diagnosing, they're fairly serious about it. It's not just like people that say, "Oh, I'm a bit OCD."
Yeah, it's very much a case of you put probably serious thought and you've probably analysed a lot of your behaviour and all of that kind of stuff, and you've probably made a lot of notes and journals and done research into it. You know, it's not something you've maybe thought of on the fly, like a passing fad. And especially with ADHD and autism diagnosis, if you're a woman, like, good luck getting those diagnoses. You know, like
it's a massive issue.
Yeah, a lot of times it'll be misdiagnosed as BPD, autism and ADHD, I believe. Autism will be misdiagnosed as BPD. Or you just won't get an ADHD diagnosis as a woman because it presents different to male.
Or certainly autistic women, or because of how women have been treated in society, there's a sense that if you're quiet and reserved and just get on with things and hard work and keep your head down, you're not autistic. Whereas if you're sort of, this kind of outspoken, more nerdy man, you are, and that's led to a lot of difficulties in women being diagnosed.
Yeah,
just because of sexism in society, really. But I think that is starting to change now, and that's a really positive thing. I definitely know more female autistic comics now that talk about it than ever before.
Yeah, that's like, it's only really been in my late teens, early 20s now, well, late teens up until now, that I've met people who non-male autistics, it's been kind of eye-opening, because I just thought, I was under the impression that it was just very, very rare that women are autistic. I just thought that it was very much like a male phenomenon, and looking into what I know now, I was very, very wrong.
I think people do think that when they're younger, but it makes complete sense. But I think one good thing to sort of wrap up a bit is that I think the fact that there's more autistic comics more and more means it's becoming a more accepted thing, and as the world becomes a better place for us, hopefully there'll be even more. I mean, all we can hope for is that we help to shine a light on some of these things and people enjoy it.
Yeah, because the percentage of I think over the next few years, the percentage of the British population that's autistic is set to go up to like 5% or something like that, with the rate of diagnosing and people realizing that they have it.
Yeah, of course.
So our recruitment drive is going very well.
Yeah, it's going great. Well, brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been really nice chatting. This will probably come out either tomorrow, the 26th, or the following Friday, because I'm going out to my mum, so I might have a few days away. But yeah, if there's anything you want to finally promote or finally say, then now's your chance to do that.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at The Old Boar. You can find me on YouTube at Aaron Hood, where you'll find my podcasts.
Brilliant.
And you can find my show, I Should Probably Discuss This in Therapy, whenever I'm allowed to perform it.
Great, really looking forward to seeing that. Thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Right. Have you... Just a quick heads up that there's a bit of swearing in this, so if you're watching with a little kid or you're particularly sensitive to that, maybe skip over this sketch, even though it's brilliant. So today's issue is echolalia. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's something a lot of autistic people have. Sometimes when we're talking and we say a word or phrase that we like, we'll repeat it back unconsciously. Sometimes it happens out loud. Now, that can be quite problematic. For example, when I was a teenager, my mum would say, "Tidy your room." That was a nice phrase to me, had a nice ring to it. So I'd say, "Tidy your room, tidy your room, tidy your room, tidy your room." And she'd say, "Don't answer back, mine's already tidy." That happened last week as well. Not that I live with my mum, but these things seem to happen worryingly frequently. But sometimes you can have a bit of fun with echolalia. You can tell people what you really think of them. Here's an example. "Harry, Tommy Robinson's kind of got a point. You're a prick, mate. You're a prick. You're a prick, mate. You're a prick. What did you call me? You're a prick, mate. You're a prick. You're a prick, mate. You're a prick. But there's too many migrants coming into the country. You're a prick, mate. You're a prick. You're a prick, mate. What did you call me? Sorry, it's my echolalia. Or on the works like this. I should probably set a drum beat down for these. Can you beatbox and speak at the same time? I'm determined to try. So yeah, might go a little something like this. Another way echolalia can make things fun for you. Harry, do you think the Tory party have some quite good ideas? You're a twat, mate. You're a twat. You're a twat, mate. You're a twat. What did you call me? You're a twat, mate. You're a twat. You're a twat, mate. You're a twat. But their economic policies are so much better than Labour. You're a twat, mate. You're a twat. You're a twat, mate. What did you call me? Sorry, it's my echolalia. So it's time for this week's recommendations. If you've watched this before, you'll know that every week I recommend 2 autistic artists who I think are worth signal boosting. Could be writers, poets, comedians, actors who either are autistic or work closely with autistic people who I think are doing amazing work. Now, the first one this week, I only found out about recently. He's pretty famous already, the rapper Designer. That's Designer with 2 eyes. He's worked with Kanye and Jay-Z on Watch the Throne. He's done loads of stuff. He was signed to Good Music, which was their label recently. Had an album out earlier this year, which was released independently. He's actually autistic. Yeah, I didn't know that either. I love the guy's stuff, and he's made loads of hits that you'll probably have heard. I don't think he discusses his autism in his music at all, really. But seeing as I spent last week looking at how black autistic people are often underrepresented, and then missed out one of the most famous black autistic people of all, I wish I'd known earlier. But his stuff's great. I'm a big rap fan anyway, so definitely check out Designer if you haven't heard anything he's been on already. I'll put a link to some of his videos in the description. Yeah, that was a surprise for me, but a very nice one because he's someone I've liked for a long time. I guess it makes sense. I don't really know what flow an autistic rapper would have. As we saw last week, it's very easy to just talk in a normal way as an autistic person, and people think you're rapping. But I'm going to listen back to some of his stuff now and see whether his normal conversations have accidentally made him a star like they did with me when I made 1 million in last week's video. Check that one out, by the way. Secondly, somebody that I think a lot of people watching this might have heard of. He's not autistic, but his book Neurotribes is seen as a Bible of how to work with and how to understand autistic people. It's one of the best books of the last few years. It won tons of awards. It's Steve Silberman. And again, I'll link to where you can buy Neurotribes in the bio. Do try to avoid Amazon at the moment, please. I'm trying to, because, we've got to boycott these bad things. We've got to boycott these companies. If you take money out of them, that's the only way we can affect real change, sadly, under capitalism. Don't want to go off on a screed, but there's loads of little great independent places that sell Neurotribes as well, and they need all the money they can get at this time. Steve Silberman does loads of interesting things, and he's on a lot of podcasts. He recently did a web chat with Dara McAnulty, who has been mentioned on this series before. Yeah, his Twitter as well, if you follow. He's an extremely interesting guy who's always promoting different art and music and work by autistic people. Neurotribes is definitely an essential read if there's somebody autistic in your life, or if you just want to know a little bit more about how our amazing brains work. So check that out and check him out. He's a real ally and an extremely intelligent guy. He's got a PhD in some shit I don't understand. And yeah, I think a lot of autistic people would see him as a neurotypical hero. So, thanks very much for watching, everybody. I'm Harry Wright, this is Autism 101, and yeah, thanks to Aaron Hood, and thanks to everyone who helped put this together. Do like and subscribe, it really helps, subscribers particularly. It helps with getting this out there and getting a bit of traction. It helps me to want to make more of them. Like I say, I'm going home to my mum's next week, so they might be videos might be a bit more erratic, but hopefully I'll be coming every Friday. Do watch some past ones as well, and make sure you've watched everything in the series, because there's a few running jokes coming through them each week. I'd particularly recommend episode 5, which was last week. That was with the Autistic League, and episode 3, which is about Black Lives Matter. But yeah, check everything out, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.